Look at a tree, a big one. An oak, maybe 100 feet tall, weighing as much as 10 elephants stacked together. Now I want you to ask a stupid-sounding question that actually breaks people's brains. Where did all that wood come from? And before you say the soil, stop, because that answer is wrong. Completely provably wrong. And the real answer is so strange that when you finally get it, you'll never look at a forest the same way again. Here's the thing nobody tells you. If trees ate the soil to grow, then the ground under every old forest should be sunk into a giant crater. Right? A tree pulls tons and tons of material out of somewhere. If it came from the dirt would be gone. But it's not. Walk into a 1,000-year-old forest, and the soil is basically still there, barely touched. So we've got tons of solid wood appearing out of nowhere. And the one thing everyone blames, the soil, turns out to be innocent. Keep that mystery in the back of your mind, because we're going to solve it. And the answer involves something you're breathing right now. Now think about how insane this actually is for a second. A single acorn weighs almost nothing. You can hold it between 2 fingers. And out of that tiny thing comes a tree that could crush a car. Where did the extra material come from? The acorn didn't have it. The ground didn't lose it. So something is smuggling in tons of mass, invisibly, and nobody notices. That's not gardening. That's a magic trick happening in slow motion, in your backyard every single day. Let me take you back about 400 years. There's a scientist named Jan van Helmont, and he's annoyed. Everybody around him is just assuming plants grow by eating dirt. Nobody checked. So he decides to actually test it. And this experiment is beautiful because it's so simple a kid could do it. He takes a pot, he fills it with soil, and he weighs that soil first, exactly 200 pounds. Then he plants a tiny willow tree in it, a little 5-pound sapling. And then for 5 years he does basically nothing except water it, rain, watering can, that's it. No fertilizer, no adding soil, just water. 5 years go by, the willow explodes, it grows into a real tree. Over 160 pounds of wood, bark, branches, leaves. So now, here's the question that should be making your eye twitch. That tree gained over 150 pounds. If it ate the soil to do that, the soil should have lost 150 pounds, right? So Van Helmont digs the tree out, dries the soil, and weighs it again. 200 years of common sense says that number is going to drop like a rock. The soil weighed almost exactly the same. It had lost about 2 ounces. 2 ounces, not 200 pounds, a couple of spoonfuls. The tree got 150 pounds heavier, and the dirt basically didn't notice. So Van Helmont is standing there holding this massive tree that came from a 5-pound twig, and the soil is untouched, and he's got 150 pounds of solid living wood that came from what? He looked at his notes and said, well, the only thing I added was water, so the tree must be made of water, and honestly, respect. He was closer than everyone who came before him, but he was still wrong. Because here's what Van Helmont couldn't have known. He was missing an invisible ingredient, something that was floating all around him, all around the tree, going in and out of every leaf, silently building the entire thing. And he couldn't see it, couldn't weigh it, couldn't even imagine it. He was standing inside the answer and couldn't feel it. So let's fast forward. What is that invisible thing? I'll give you a hint. You just made some, you're making it right now. Every time you breathe out, it's carbon dioxide, gas, air. And this is the part where physics stops being boring and starts being genuinely insane. Because the tree, that heavy, solid, real knock on it with your knuckles tree, is mostly built out of air. I know how that sounds. Air is nothing, air is empty. You wave your hand through it and feel basically zilch. How do you build a 100-foot solid object out of nothing? But here's the trick your brain is missing. Air is not nothing. Air has weight, actually. Believe it or not, the air inside an average bedroom weighs about as much as a small child. It's just spread out so thin you never feel it. Air has stuff in it. Actual matter, actual atoms. When you breathe out carbon dioxide, you're breathing out carbon, a real physical element just glued to some oxygen and floating away as gas. And the tree has figured out how to grab that carbon out of the sky and lock it into place. This is what's happening in every leaf right now in total silence. Sunlight hits the leaf pulls in carbon dioxide from the air through tiny little pores. Think of them as microscopic mouths. It sips up water from the roots. And then, powered by sunlight, it does something that should honestly be considered magic. It rips the carbon dioxide apart. It keeps the carbon, it throws the oxygen away. That's the oxygen you and I are breathing, by the way. That's literally tree exhaust, and it takes that captured carbon and starts snapping it together into sugar, into fiber, into wood. So let me say the wild part out loud, slowly, so it lands. When you look at a tree, most of what you're looking at came out of the sky. The wood is carbon that used to be gas floating in the air. The tree reached up, pulled the sky down piece by piece, atom by atom, and turned it solid. That log in a fireplace, that was air. That wooden table, air, caught and frozen in place by a plant using sunlight. That paper you write on, that's air too. Van Helmont's willow didn't come from the soil, and it didn't really come from the water either. It came mostly from the atmosphere. Now hang on, you might be thinking, okay, but the roots. The roots must be doing something, and you're right, they are, but probably not what you think. The tree does pull tiny amounts of minerals out of the soil, little traces of nitrogen, potassium, stuff like that, but that's less than a few % of the whole tree. Think of it like this. If the tree is a giant cake, the soil only provides a pinch of the seasoning. The actual flour, the actual bulk of the cake, comes from the air and the water. The roots are more about drinking and standing up straight than about building the body. So we cleared the soil's name. And now, hold on, because there's a twist here that flips the whole thing again. If the tree is basically solidified air, solidified carbon, then what happens when you burn it? What are you actually doing when you light a log on fire? You're running the whole thing in reverse. Think about it. The tree spent years quietly pulling carbon out of the air and locking it into wood, slowly, gently, using sunlight. Fire undoes all of that in minutes. When wood burns, the carbon in it grabs oxygen out of the air and flies back up into the sky as carbon dioxide, the exact same gas the tree pulled down in the first place. The flames, the heat, the light coming off that fire, that's the sunlight. That's the stored energy the tree collected over its whole life, all those years of quiet afternoons, being released back out all at once. When you sit by a campfire, you are literally warming your hands on old sunshine. Let that sit for a second. The warmth from burning wood is sunlight that a tree caught decades ago and held onto. You're releasing summers from 20 years ago into the room. That's not poetry, that's just physics. And it gets bigger. Coal, oil, gas, the stuff we run our entire civilization on, that's the same story stretched across millions of years. That's ancient forests and ancient plants that pulled carbon out of the sky, died, got buried, got squeezed underground for ages. When we burn fossil fuels, we're releasing sunlight that hit the earth before the dinosaurs. Every time you drive a car, you're burning prehistoric sunshine that a plant captured out of the air 100 million years ago. The whole modern world runs on trapped sky. And this is exactly what Richard Feynman loved to point out, because it wrecks the way we normally think. We look at solid stuff and gas as totally different worlds. Rock is real, air is empty, but it's all just atoms. The only difference between the invisible air and the solid tree is how those atoms are arranged and how tightly they're packed. A tree is a machine that takes loose, floating atoms and stacks them into a tower. Burning is that tower falling back apart. Nothing gets created, nothing gets destroyed. Atoms just move around and change partners. The universe is basically running the same handful of Lego bricks through endless different builds, and a forest is one of those builds temporarily. So now go back to that giant oak from the very beginning. 10 elephants worth of weight, and now you actually know the secret. That mass didn't climb up out of the ground. Most of it drifted in on the wind, one invisible molecule at a time, and got welded into place by light. Every tree you've ever seen is a slow-motion sculpture carved out of thin air. Forests aren't growing out of the planet. They're pulling the sky down and turning it into wood. Zoom out far enough, and the whole planet is doing this. Every forest, every field of grass, every bit of green algae in the ocean, all of it is quietly grabbing carbon out of the air and building bodies out of it. And then animals eat the plants, and now that carbon is in the animal. And you eat the animal, or you eat the plant. And now that carbon is in you, the carbon in your own body, the stuff you're literally made of right now, was floating in the sky as gas not that long ago. You're also, in a very real way, made of air and sunlight. And here's the last little mind bender before I let you go. That carbon, those atoms in the tree, they've been around forever. Some of the carbon in the tree outside your window might have been inside a dinosaur, might have been part of an ocean, might have been breathed out by someone who lived 1,000 years ago. The atoms don't disappear. They just keep getting recycled through living things. Over and over, for billions of years, the tree is borrowing them. You're borrowing them right now. And someday they go back into the pile for the next thing to use. Nothing in nature is really destroyed. It's all just on loan, passed hand to hand, from air to tree to fire to animal to you and back to air again, in a loop that's been running since the beginning of the world. So the next time someone tells you a tree came from the soil, you'll know better. It came from the air. It came from the light. And if that broke your brain even a little bit, that's the feeling of actually understanding something for the first time. And it's the best feeling there is. If you felt that click just now, do me a favor and hit like. So more people get their assumptions wrecked too. Subscribe if you want the universe explained like this every week. And drop a comment. What's something you believed your whole life that turned out to be completely wrong? I read them. See you in the next one.